I can sleep with my eyes open. I talk in my sleep? It's 2:40 and I'm going to call the meeting back to order. We were in closed session and we made a motion to come out of closed session at 2:34, I believe it was. Motion was made by Councillor Christie, I believe. Councillor McGee, right? Thank you. You were in, she was out. We recessed to allow a return of the gallery and the public, and we are back to our budget discussion. On the dashboard currently in front of us is reflected residential tax rate change of 4%, farm of 17.5, non-residential at 3.75 to allow a slight reduction in the residential non-residential ratio, which at this point in time is leaving us with a 516,000 and change shortfall. So the ongoing discussion that we need to have at this point in time is how we address that shortfall. And previous to going into closed session, we had some conversation around how we would address that using the revenue stabilization reserve, which is monies that we've collected in the past to allow for bumps in revenue in the future. So I guess the question that needs to be asked and answered at this point in time in order to finalize our budget conversation to this point would be if we are in agreement that the way we would address the existing shortfall would be to use that reserve, which is in place to deal with exactly this kind of situation. So I'm asking council, actually I'm going to get you to weigh in verbally if you don't mind, Deputy Reeve Whitstock.
All righty. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The reason that revenue stabilization fund was actually set up was exactly for these purposes. We knew years ago that there was going to be deficits coming into the budget. The budgets were going to be hard to deal with. And we used funds that were collected back in years ago. I would probably say 10 years, maybe even further back. And we collected those revenues, put them in a revenue stabilization fund because we knew these days were coming forward. So I would certainly be in support of using that revenue stabilization fund to fund our shortfall this year.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other comment or questions from council regarding the use of the revenue stabilization reserve? Councillor Christie.
I agree that that's a reasonable request for that reserve. I also want to point out that the 17.5% on farmland offsets the ag service requirement to get our weed control in rural Kneehill better done. So that cost is being passed back to the actual farmland owners.
Okay, thank you for that. Any further questions or comments? Councillor Cunningham.
So yeah, I have to go against the grain here, unfortunately, but I am not in favor of using the Revenue Stabilization Fund. I would be more in favor of cutting back on some of our new initiatives because we simply can't afford them, but that's just where I'm at.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other comment or direction? Anyone else wishing to comment? So what's being currently proposed is that we use the revenue stabilization reserve, which was put in place to deal with shortfalls like the one we are discussing. We have heard a few opinions, and I guess I'm looking for further direction. Go ahead, Deputy Reeve Whitstock.
You'd like me to make that into a motion?
Sure, I'd love for that to happen. Thank you.
Okay, then I will move that we use the revenue stabilization fund for, what was it, 606,000? Am I correct on that?
We're currently short 516,804.
Oh, okay, well, let's do 516,804 then. To be used as a way to balance the budget. Thank you.
Okay, so we have that motion. Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion? I'm just doing some sidebar math here, so if you'll bear with me for a minute. Still looking for any further conversation? No. Councillor Forbes, I knew I could count on you.
I also feel the same way as Councillor Cunningham. Sometimes I feel like you come with a want list and it's longer than what we can afford. So I would just moving forward would like admin, and I know you guys cut and cut and cut, and you do the best you can with what you've been given, but we're also in that same boat. As a counselor, I have to be cognizant of everybody's money that I'm spending to pay off a shortfall or any shortfall period. And so it does have to come back to the ratepayers, and I'm ultimately one of those. And so I'm not in favor, true story today, of going with the shortfall. I would like to see admin come back with some other cutbacks in places, but that's just me personally, and I'm one vote amongst everyone here.
Okay, no, that's reasonable. Thank you for that. Anyone else caring to weigh in? So we know that a number of projects were proposed and have been previously agreed to by council in the new initiative side of things. The savings that would be available to council, other than the Ag Service Board money, would be $289,764 if we said no to all of those new initiatives. So unless we're going to say no to increased weed control and no to increased mowing and no to all the other things that we previously agreed that we would support, we are not going to save the $516,804 that we've projected as a shortfall. We'd still be sitting at $230,000 or $40,000. So we have a motion. The motion is that we use the Revenue Stabilization Fund to fund the current shortfall of $516,804. And I'm going to ask if there's any further conversation on that particular motion. And if there is none, I am going to ask the question. Councillor Forbes, yes?
Just for clarity, the reason why we have a $516,000 shortfall would also be contributing to the fact that we've now started to put reserves away for future costs that we weren't doing currently before. Am I correct?
Yes. Mr. Hogan, or?
Okay. To you, Mr. Chair, we were putting money away into reserves in the past, but we have been escalating the amount that we're putting away into reserves. So as an example here today, council's discussed the equipment replacement funding plan. So that, and you know that as part of this, you reduced that contribution, you reduced the increase on that contribution by 50%, right? There are other elements in there. So as an example, there was an extra, I believe, 100,000 put into the gravel reserve, which is again part of a longer term strategy. So you, as council, you have been putting money into those reserves, but you have been escalating that amount over the last few years as well.
Any further discussion? Am I correct in saying part of that escalation is in recognition of inflationary pressures that we're under and trying to adapt to those pressures?
I would say that's true for most of the budget.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? If not, we have a motion to, oh, Councillor Cunningham,
Can I
yes,
just,
go ahead.
can I
Nope.
request a recorded vote on this motion, please?
Sure. So we have a request for a recorded vote. Any further discussion? So the process I guess I'm going to go through is I'll poll each councillor individually so that our recording secretary can record votes in favor or opposed. So Deputy Reeve Whitstock, since you are the motion originator, I'm going to ask you first. Are you in favor or opposed?
I would do a yay.
Thank you. Councillor McGee.
Yes.
Councillor Forbes.
No.
Councillor Christie, since you're farther away. Councillor Cunningham.
Yes. My mic was on.
I'm a no.
Councillor Cunningham, thank you. And myself, I am a Yes. So the motion is passed to balance our budget currently by using the Revenue Stabilization Reserve funds. So I guess my follow-up question to you, Ms. Von Merbach, is have we accomplished what we needed to do as far as budget was concerned today? And is there any additional information that you would need or administration would need from us to go forward?
As far as the operating budget, yes, I have everything that I need to ensure that we bring back a balanced operating budget on the 12th. My one question would be, there's also projects in front of council which are either reserve or grant funded, and whether all of those should be put into the proposed budget on the 12th, or whether there's any further discussion that council would like to have on those proposed projects.
Okay, so in order to have a fruitful discussion around that, we probably should have those in front of us again. And again, I'm not sure where to find them in my budget book, but if you could find those. So basically what we're saying is we have these projects that are funded either through grants or through reserve funding. And we just need to, so whether they're included in the final budget or not depends on whether we're in agreement with going forward. Okay.
Yes.
So you just want to outline those for us, please, and then we can give you an answer.
Okay, so I'm going to just go back to the beginning of where we listed all the projects earlier on in the presentation. I've actually gone and added and included in the budget comment line so that council's able to track that, and then I can send that out to council as follow-up if they desire. So the first section, it was projects that are 2023 projects with 2024 budget requirements. The first one is an additional $22,000 from the roads reserve for rural road construction.
Okay,
Second one is an extra $550,000 from the roads reserve for bridge file 13477. And again, that's one where we're applying for STIP grant funding, which if that was approved, that would reduce the draw from the roads reserve.
right. So it's not impacting operating budget, it's just going to impact draws from reserve.
That's correct. All of the projects that we still have to go through, nothing impacts the operating budget. It only impacts reserve draws. And in fact, if we have, at this point, my dashboard shows yes for all projects. And if we were to defer those, I can show you updated reserve draws and funding sources, because I also have a project dashboard as well.
Great, thank you.
So do you want me to just keep going
Yes,
through
yes,
unless,
please. Yeah.
Absolutely. The next category is replacement of existing assets. So we have, these ones are, most of these are capital equipment plan replacements. So there's 2 light-duty pickup trucks from Ag Services. There's a utility tractor in Ag Services, and parks and cemeteries. There's 2 mowers within that area. There's the informational sign replacement at Horseshoe Canyon, and there's a playground replacement. The first items are from the capital equipment plan reserve. The informational sign is from the parks reserve, and the playground replacement is actually funded with a combination of community fundraising, community programs, and the parks reserve. We then have the IT capital plan purchases for $63,800 from the IT reserve, the council room video wall for $44,000 from the IT reserve. Then we have from Protective Services, the Acme tender replacements for $715,000 from the Capital Equipment Plan Reserve, $330,000 for a calcium applicator water truck from the Capital Equipment Plan Reserve, and the end dump gravel trailer from the Capital Equipment Plan Reserve. Continuing on with the replacement of existing assets, there's a heavy-duty 1-ton pickup from the Capital Equipment Plan Reserve. There's 4 3/4-ton pickups from the Capital Equipment Plan Reserve. There's a gravel dump trailer from the Capital Equipment Plan Reserve, a rough terrain forklift, a D5 dozer, again, both from the Capital Equipment Plan Reserve, and then 3 bridge file projects, 2 of which are proposed to be done through the CCBF grant funding from the province, and 1 is anticipated to be done through the roads reserve. That one is actually just the first year of the design phase that's budgeted for 2024. Then we have items that are the maintenance of existing assets. So we have $220,000 for major bridge maintenance coming out of the roads reserve. We have $22,000 in initial design fees or costs related to the administration and FCSS parking lots, to be funded through the building reserve. We have a renovation for the Protective Services Office for $49,500 to be funded from the building reserve. We have some renovations at the Public Works shop yard, both on the shop itself and on some of the external buildings for $82,500, which is a combination of being funded through the building reserve and the CCBF grant funding. And then there's $44,000 at the Three Hills Transfer Station through CCBF grant funding. We then have new assets. So there's an event and market space development for $38,500 funded out of the Parks Reserve, $13,900 for Horseshoe Canyon shade structures, again from the Parks Reserve. There's $110,000 for the initial design phase of the Horseshoe Canyon Interpretive Center, which is recommended to be funded out of the Revenue Stabilization Reserve. There's $44,000 recommended to come from the Water Reserve to fence the Swalwell pump house site. There's $44,000 coming out of the Building Capital Replacement Reserve to fence the Wimborne and Linden towers. And there's $55,000 to be funded out of the CCBF grant fund for burn training structure additions at the Trochu Fire Hall. And the final category of projects that are either reserve or grant funded or operating projects. Again, these ones are ones that are non-capital in nature. There's the Growing Kneehill event, which I believe we are anticipating to defer until further council discussions. It was originally proposed in October, and we kind of anticipated, we weren't sure if those discussions would be complete by now or not. There's $105,600 from the Water Reserve for a utility master plan in Torrington. There's $55,000 from the contingency reserve for some concrete crushing at the Kneehill County Solid Waste Transfer Site. There's $22,000 coming from the building capital replacement for Public Sector Digest citywide maintenance manager enhancements, which is intended to allow facilities to better use that program. And there's $110,000 from the roads reserve to become for pavement condition assessment report.
Okay, thank you for that. So are there any questions from council regarding the proposal for projects, placement of assets, maintenance, and the other reserve funded items that are listed here? If not, I guess you would be looking for a motion from council to say that we approve including them in the overall budget for 2024?
Yes, that would suit.
So, Councillor Christie?
I was waiting for you to read the motion. So moved.
So Councillor Christie is making the motion that council approve the, I can go back to it again, the reserve funded projects proposed in the 2024 budget book. As presented. So, Councillor Christie, does that read as?
Yes.
Currently, that would include the Growing Kneehill event until further council discussion. Any discussion, any comment, questions? We have Mr. Hogan, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if council isn't required to do this, but if you want to, you could add to that motion with further discussion to occur regarding the Growing Kneehill event.
Counselor Christie, would you be okay with that addition to your motion?
I certainly would.
And what that, through Mr. Chair, what that means is essentially, once the budget has been approved, the way that administration approaches that is green means go on the project. So what this does, it essentially puts a little asterisk beside that growing Kneehill event and says, in this case, green doesn't quite mean go. Right? We need to have more discussion about it.
It's a yellow light.
Yeah.
Any further discussion to the motion? The motion is that council approve the reserve-funded projects proposed in the 2024 budget book as presented, with further discussion to happen regarding the growing Kneehill event. Councillor Cunningham?
I think I know the answer to this, but we to date have received no clarification from Travel Alberta, the government of Alberta, or the federal government on any funding that could come to us for the Horseshoe Canyon Interpretive Center washroom facility. Is that correct?
Mr. Gannon?
Thank you. The only two streams of funding that we've seen right now is for the small communities funding, which we're, if this project gets approved for the feasibility study, is that we're going to be submitting for that. The other grant would not apply to this funding mechanism.
Okay, so at this point, we have no funding in place or talked about with other orders of government.
There's been discussions with regards to funding, but no guarantees.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cunningham, is that? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, so I'm going to read the motion one last time, and then we're going to ask the question. That council approve, moved by Councillor Christie, that council approve the reserve-funded projects proposed for the 2024 budget book as presented, with further discussion to happen regarding the growing Kneehill event. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor? Opposed? Reeve Whitstock, I'm sorry, you were lagging. Were you in favor or opposed? In favor, okay. That motion is carried. Did you want to move? Okay, all right. So again, Ms. Von Merbach, have we provided you with the direction that you need?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Okay.
We will go.
Thank you for your patience with us today and for answering the questions that we had and providing the information that's in front of us. Your efforts, and I know there's other people backing you up, their efforts are much appreciated, and if you would pass along our thanks, I would appreciate that.
Absolutely, thank you. I look forward to seeing you on the 12th with the finalized budget book.
Well, thank you. Your time is very much appreciated. All right, are we good to continue, or does anybody need a break? Okay, so the next items on our agenda are 7.1 and policy 15-1 Century Farm and Ranch Award. And I assume, Ms. Vanderkool, you are taking these items.
I am taking this. Who is excited about grant policies? Yes.
Oh, can we
Just trying to
talk more
liven you
about
up.
budget?
I don't know how I can beat budget, but I'll try my best.
Make it fun.
All right. So, council, the next 7 agenda items are grant policies ready for ratification. As part of council's 4-year policy review schedule of existing policies, we brought you a review of the grant program policies at the June 20th Committee of the Whole meeting. At that time, council reviewed the existing grant policies and reviewed how they coincided with our strategic goals and tactics, and reviewed some strategic goals that were possible policy gaps. Before we start, I have put on all your desks a worksheet, not as nice as Marika's, but a synopsis of all the grants that we are going to discuss today, with the budget amount, eligibility, and the purpose of the grant. for easy reference for you today. I want to also clarify that the existing grant policies, along with 2 new grant policies, funding levels are the same and no new funding will be provided. We have moved funds from our existing grants to fund new grants. So first step for today is policy 15-1, the Century Farm and Ranch Award. Council at the initial meeting back in June did not have any concerns with this policy. The attached documents comprise of a marked up version of policy 15-1, and the policy edits include the following changes: elimination of the general ledger account number, which provides administration the flexibility to change the account numbers if required. Annually, administration budgets $3,600 to this program, which allows for 4 applications. So council options today are to approve the policy as presented, or the council can amend the policy, or you can just receive this policy for information.
This page?
Oh, would you like one?
Do you want this one? Because I think Jerry had one here too, maybe. Oh, maybe not. Oh. Okay, so what's the wish of council? Deputy Reeve Whitstock.
Did you want to put that policy up on the screen?
Thank you, Miss Vanderkool. What this does is it mirrors the provincial application, and once the provincial application is accepted, then we just kind of follow along. I'm correct in that assumption?
Yep, that is totally correct.
In that case, I would move that we accept this. Oh, I don't have the motion in front of me. Just hang on a sec. I can do this. Oh. I would move that council approve policy 15-1 Century Farm and Ranch Award as presented.
Thank you very much, Deputy Reeve Whitstock. Any further discussion on the part of council? Seeing none, I'm going to ask the question. All those in favor? And that is approved unanimously.
Thank you, council.
And moving on to policy 15-4.
Perfect. This is a new policy. Council expressed interest in exploring a rural community hall capital grant to provide capital funding for rural halls. It's important to know that these halls already have access to policy 15-13 rural community halls, which covers operating grants. Council discussion during the June 20th Committee of the Whole meeting revolved around several key points. They sought to utilize existing funds for the new grant program. They emphasized the need for active use of funds from both the original community grant program and proposed rural community hall grant program, rather than having unused funds in one program while eligible applications might exist in the other. Council emphasized their reluctance to allocate funding to halls that aren't effectively utilized and expressed a desire to see a stronger commitment to usage. They also expressed an interest in encouraging community participation by requiring matching funds for applicants. In response to these discussions, administration prepared an initial draft of the policy, which was presented to council for review during the September 19th, 2023 Committee of the Whole meeting. At that time, council made the following requests. They suggested making it mandatory to present projects to council for approval if the grant amount falls within the range of $2,000 to $5,000. Administration used the $5,000 threshold in the policy, as this amount represents a more substantial project, avoiding frequent council delegations for smaller $2,000 requests. Council requested a review of volunteer hours to align with current wage standards in Alberta, and they expressed a desire for increased recognition for the county when providing grant funding, including the possibility of photo opportunities. So the attached document contains a draft version of the new policy 15-4. This policy has been developed based on the feedback and input provided by council. Funding for this program will be sourced from the Community Grants for Nonprofit Organizations program. As a result, the funding for that program will be reduced to $30,000, with $20,000 allocated to support this new rural community hall capital grant program. So today's options for council is to approve the policy as presented, council to make amendments to the policy or to receive for information. And the policy is attached for your review.
Thank you for that. Are there any comments or questions regarding the proposed Rural Hall Capital Grant Policy 15-4? Councillor Phobes.
I make the motion to approve policy 15-4, rural community hall capital grant.
Okay, thank you for that. We have a motion to approve policy 15-4, the Rural Community Hall Capital Grant Policy. Any discussion? If not, I'm going to ask the question. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to 15-13.
All right, so we got policy 15-13, rural community halls. This is an existing policy and was presented at the June 20th Committee of the Whole meeting. And during that meeting, council did not express any concerns with this existing policy. The attached document comprises a marked up version of policy 15-13. The policy edits include the following changes. Change the name of the program from Rural Community Halls to Rural Community Halls Operating Grant. This name reflects the policy's purpose of providing operating grant funding to rural halls. It would also sets it apart from new proposed rural hall capital grant policy that you just approved. Removal of allocation amounts will be indexed annually with the October Consumer Price Index. No other policies have this index in them, and this way administration will be able to budget appropriately as the budget amount will be set every year. Review of the funding can be done every 4 years when we renew the policy. Council at this time has the authority to amend the funding levels provided if they find them inappropriate. Removal of the reference to the specific general ledger line. The annual funding for this program with the proposed rates is $27,600. The attached policy is attached to this RFD, and council's options today is to approve as presented, amend the policy, or council receive for information.
Okay, thank you. So we have the revised policy 15-13, rural community halls. Any questions or comments? Councillor McGee.
I move that we approve policy 15-13, rural community halls as presented.
Okay, so I have a motion to approve policy 15-13, rural community halls as presented. And there's no further discussion. Seeing none. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to policy 15-3, community grants to nonprofit organizations. And go ahead.
Thank you, Reeve. Council reviewed this existing policy at the June 20th Committee of the Whole meeting, and at that time, council did not express any concerns with this existing policy. The attached documents comprise of a marked up version and a finalized draft of the policy. The policy edits include the following changes. Removal of the requirement for programs, events, and activities to be excluded from county support when covered by other programs or policies, except for Kneehill County Rural Community Halls listed in policy 15-13. A new policy was just approved and developed to address rural hall capital expenditures, and as council is the final approval, it is ultimately your decision whether you approve a program that has received support from the county from other funding source. The other change was elimination of the general ledger account number taken out of the policy, an increase in the value of volunteerism to align with the figures used in the community facility enhancement program. They're the same numbers that we used in the other grant policy we approved earlier. Removal of the grant application form as Schedule A to this policy. This allows administration to modify the application form without the need for council approval. Once the policy has been approved, a review of the grant application will happen with the addition of providing a brief explanation about your association as discussed at the last community grant selection meeting. The elimination of the requirement that the grant will be advertised in the Three Hills Capital newspaper at least 3 times prior to each application deadline. The decision on where and how frequently the policy will be advertised is now at the discretion of administration. Flexibility regarding the review of applications, allowing it to take place in either a committee of the whole meeting or a regular council meeting, depending on the convenience for both administration and council. And the removal of any reference to the accountability form, Schedule B. Administration has the flexibility to make changes to the form without requiring council approval. The funding for this program was initially set at $50,000. However, due to the introduction of the new Rural Hall Capital Grant Policy, $20,000 has been reallocated from the community grant to nonprofit budget to support this program. As a result, this program will now operate with a total funding of $30,000. Council's options today is to approve as presented, amend the policy, or to receive this policy for information.
Any discussion regarding policy 15-3 as it's being proposed here today? If there is none, what's the wish of council? Councillor Cunningham.
I'll move that council approve policy 15-3, community grants to nonprofit organizations as presented.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve policy 15-3, community grants to nonprofit organizations as presented. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously as well. Thank you. Moving on to policy 15-7, community enrichment support program.
Perfect. Who's still excited about grants? All right. So administration presented and reviewed this existing policy at the June 20th Committee of the Whole meeting, and during that meeting, council did not express any concerns with this existing policy. The attached documents comprise of a marked up version. The policy edits include the following changes. Change the name of the program from Recreation, Community Arts and Cultural Events to Community Enrichment Support Program. This name reflects the policy's purpose of providing support for community arts and cultural events, as well as its aim to enhance and enrich the community through sponsorship and grants. And the removal of any budget allotment amount. This provides council the ability to change funding levels without having to change the policy. The funding for this program was initially set at $10,000. However, due to the introduction of the new Kneehill County Rural Resident Connection Grant, $4,000 has been reallocated from this community grant budget to support this program. As a result, this program will now operate with a total funding of $6,000. Council's options today is to approve as presented, amend the policy, or to receive for information.
So any comments or discussion? The only comment I would make is I assume that when we see the final version, it'll be titled Community Enhancement Support Program.
Yeah, for some reason, my new e-scribe changed the names on me. It's some sort of a function that I have to fix.
Okay. But I am correct in that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Any further discussion, or Councillor McGee?
I'd like to move that we approve 15-7, community enrichment support program as presented.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve policy 15-1-7, Community Enrichment Support Program. Any further discussion, comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? And that is also carried unanimously. So the next one up is policy 15-8, Rural Residents Connection Grant.
That is correct. So council expressed interest in exploring a rural resident connections grant that encourages Kneehill County residents to engage in local activities and promote social connections. Council discussions during the meeting revolved around several key points. They sought to utilize existing funds for the new grant program. Council would like to be the final approver of all applications. Council would like to see reporting back measures put in place so we can advertise these events and get recognition. Administration crafted an initial draft policy and brought it forth to council at the September 19th Committee of the Whole meeting, and it underwent minimal alterations. The attached document contains a draft version of the new policy. This policy has been developed based on the feedback and input provided by council. Funding for this program will be sourced from the current Recreation Community Arts and Cultural Events Program, which we just renamed. As a result, the funding for that program will be reduced to $6,000, with $4,000 allocated to support this new Rural Resident Connections Grant Program. And attached is the new grant, and council's options today is approve as presented, amend the policy, or receive for information.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, discussion regarding policy 15-8, Rural Residents Connections Grant? Councilor Forbes.
I make the motion to approve policy 15-8, Rural Resident Connection Grant as presented.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve policy 15-8, which is the Rural Resident Connections Grant as presented. Any further discussion or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is carried unanimously again. Moving on, we are now at policy 15-10, which is Youth Event Sponsorship Grant.
Thank you, Reeve. Administration brought this policy to council at the June 20th Committee of the Whole meeting. During that meeting, council expressed interest in wanting to see the youth sponsorship program expanded. Council discussion during the meeting revolved around several key points. Council wants a program that engages in youth. Council would like to be the final approver for all applications, have an available funding pool in place for youth programs. Would like to see reporting back measures put in place so we can advertise these events and get recognition. In response to these discussions, administration prepared an initial draft of the policy, which was presented to council for review during the September 19th Committee of the Whole meeting. At that time, council made the following requests. Would like to see presentations completed for each application and performed by the youth if possible. Administration added to the policy, it is encouraged for applicants to present to council, especially if they can be conducted by the youth involved, but is not mandatory. And diversity and inclusion removed from the policy. The attached document contains a draft version of the revamped policy. This policy has been developed based on the feedback and input provided by council. Administration has proposed that each applicant is limited to one grant per financial year. This was not a discussion at the presentation, and council direction on this is requested. So we never discussed if it was only one per year or if they can have as many applications as they want. So I just wanted council's input on that.
Okay, so there's the question. Are we wanting this grant to be available to applicants more than once in a calendar year or just one time? And if so, are we prepared to adjust the policy to reflect that change? So what is the wish of council? What's the thoughts? Comments? Councillor McGee.
I like keeping the 1 year in there, and so just for the conversation, I will say that I would like to move to approve policy 15-10, youth event sponsorship grant as presented.
Okay, so Councillor McGee has indicated she's happy with the one per year event and moved the policy 15-10 youth event sponsorship grant as presented. Is there any further discussion around the question on frequency? From what I see, it sounds like most of council would be in agreement with that. And so if there's no further discussion, I am going to ask the question. All those in favor? And again, that is approved unanimously. And thank you, Ms. van der Hoel. Appreciate your time and your presentation and the effort that you put in here. So the next item on our agenda is 7.8, which is the Alberta Utilities Commission review. And Mr. Hogan, I assume you're taking this one.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. As council is aware, the province has announced a halt of new Alberta Utility Commission approvals for renewable energy developments such as wind, solar, and geothermal. I will note this halt means a halt to the approvals, not a halt to the process, as we're well aware from me leaving and entering the room today. The AUC is currently accepting comment and presentation from parties regarding the future development of power generation facilities. And as municipalities have been given the opportunity to participate, including making an oral presentation. This would take place in December. And so we're just looking for council's formal direction to take part in this or not.
Okay, so we did have a conversation around this at our most recent COW meeting, Committee of the Whole. Is there any further discussion or comment, or what direction would we like to give on this policy? Sorry. So we had asked for this at Committee of Whole, so basically what administration is looking for is our direction to register and provide a presentation at the AUC review. What's the wish of council? Councillor McGee.
We did thoroughly discuss it at COW, and I'm quite comfortable making the motion to direct administration to register with the Alberta Utilities Commission for the purposes of conducting an oral presentation. And I thank administration for taking this on.
Okay, so basically, the purpose of this is so that Kneehill County would have their views registered under the review of the AUC mandate, and we as council have asked administration if they would do that on our behalf, and so they're just coming here now to officially make that a part of what we have requested. And we have a motion to that effect. Thank you, Councillor McGee. Any further comment or discussion? I'm not seeing any, so I'm going to ask the question. All those in favor? And that is also carried unanimously. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is 7.9, which is a conversation around legislative services and the Committee of the Whole meeting on December 5th. So who wants to tackle that one? It's an addition to the agenda.
Through Mr. Chair, Carolyn has been good enough to remind me on this addition, is right now just querying council around the December 5th Committee of the Whole meeting. There currently isn't any business looked at for that meeting, so unless something comes up, our recommendation would be for council to cancel that meeting, which of course we would need to do through a formal resolution here today. If there is business that council wants to do at that meeting, then we can, there's nothing, if there's business you can do at that meeting and you want to, then there's nothing that we need to do here today.
Okay. I guess I would say, I know there was some previous conversation around the length of today's meeting and whether we would be able to finish everything, including one of the items under the closed session. And so I guess I'm looking to council for direction. Would you like to reschedule that conversation that we had scheduled for the closed session to the 5th, which then it gives us time to manage it in a more relaxed fashion and not rush through that conversation? If so, I think that would be one of the things we would put on that agenda. And if there was other things as council we would like to have conversation about, if you would like to bring those forward. So Councillor Phobes.
I would like to also see if we're going to have the meeting on the 5th, the unsightly bylaw for hamlets, because I've had a lot of issues with unsightly properties in my little town of Torrington. So I'd like to address, because I don't believe it's robust enough for what's going on out there currently.
Okay, so that could be a preliminary conversation around the unsightly bylaw. I know it doesn't really give our development people time to come fully prepared, but certainly we could have maybe some conversation in terms of direction as to what as council we're thinking about. Mr. Hogan, go ahead.
I was just going to expand on your point, Mr. Chair, is that given that's a December 5th meeting, we're putting that out there, there would really be nothing coming from administration other than just the bylaw and introducing it for council discussion. So there wouldn't be any sort of assessment from our part.
Well, I would like to see it because I did put that in an email that I would like to see that come forward for a discussion.
Okay, we can put that on the 5th. There won't, like I said, it'll literally just be the bylaw.
Okay, Councillor McGee?
Mr. Hogan, could you please tell me what topics you have scheduled for the upcoming COW meetings in the new year? Did you have any things set yet as to which meetings you were going to see different topics?
The formally in front of me right now, I'd have to, I don't have that answer. I'd have to refer back to the schedule that we have to see if there's anything on there. Generally, I don't know that we've populated that yet with any of the policy reviews or anything of that nature. I would have to check that.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor McGee, yes.
Today's presentation that I know is coming up in our next agenda item, I do think I would love to see a bit of a conversation, and I don't know if the 5th is appropriate. I understand that our Kevin Gagnon has been working with him some bit, and I would love to hear some of his perspectives. And I'm not sure if we have the time right at this time to discuss the Travel Alberta Destination Development Plan component as wholesomely as I was hoping to.
Okay.
So I'm suggesting that maybe we table that for that day. I'm not saying I'm tabling it. I'm asking if that's a smart thing to consider.
Okay, so let me just ask Mr. Gannon, in light of the request for a more fulsome discussion, could you be prepared by next week to do that, or would you prefer to push that off to a further committee of the whole meeting?
Thank you through the chair. There's a lot of pieces that are involved with that conversation. There's the Growing Kneehill event that we're looking at bringing back to council in January for the committee of the whole meeting. And that may create some understanding and momentum of the Horseshoe Master Plan and the further direction, as well as we're going through our economic development plan. So I feel all these pieces kind of create a puzzle in order to provide that path forward. But we can definitely have a conversation of some of the high-level constructive understanding of Travel Alberta, which they presented today, how we feel that it may impact our current design for those future discussions, if that's direction council would like to go. But like I said, for us to pull all that information and trying to put that puzzle together for you, it would be a conversational piece with what we currently have, and it may not offer any more than that.
So I guess the question I would ask you, Councillor McGee, would it be more appropriate to push that into January where we have that discussion sort of already planned, and just receive what we got today as information, knowing that we would come back to discuss it in January?
I think I have questions and thoughts that I'd like to discuss before we have that January piece,
Okay,
because I think it could influence what comes forward. And I think the amount of discussion you're talking about and suggesting that is possible for December 5th is exactly what I mean. I don't need an in-depth understanding for making decisions, but I'd like to be able to have a wholesome conversation as a group about what things matter to us as you get ready for the January meeting and for the other projects going forward in that. Does that make sense?
okay, so what I'm understanding is that you're basically asking for an initial conversation around what we heard today, and potentially we'd be proposing questions to administration that they then could come back in January to respond to.
Right, so kind of preparing for the January discussion,
Okay.
yes.
Does that seem reasonable to administration? Again, it's a more surface level discussion than maybe what we will have later, but
Through the chair, I love discussion, so I'm looking forward to it.
okay. All right. Are there any other questions or comments from council? Mr. Hogan, please.
Just through, Mr. Chair, just in light of that, I would still recommend that we accept the presentation here today for information, because you won't be able to make that resolution at committee of the whole.
Okay, thank you. All right,
Actually, sorry, I need to correct that. You can accept things for information at committee of the whole. What I should have said is that if you do it at this meeting, then it does wrap up that, you saw it today, you dealt
the
it today.
delegation that we had today.
Yeah. And that doesn't prohibit the discussion from occurring on the 5th.
All right, so guess I'm understanding that based on our discussion around 7.9 is that we will be having a committee of the whole meeting on December the 5th, and that we will not be canceling that meeting. So the direction to administration is that we have a couple of items that we'd like to have conversation on, and then we have at least one item in closed session that we need to deal with on that date. Okay, we're good? So is that the motion that we need to make? And it basically says that we're ignoring the request to cancel? Okay, there is no motion. All right. Okay, thank you. All right, moving on. The next item in our agenda is disposition of delegation and public hearing business. And I would suggest that we have two motions potentially to make here. One with regard to the Travel Alberta Destination Development Plan, and the other just to receive for information the delegation that we had from the wind energy company. Mr. Gannon.
Thank you through the chair. First, I would like to convey that Ms. Kester sends her regrets for not being here to present this. She was a big part of working at getting the proponents here to have a conversation with council to start the further discussion that we will have on the 5th and within the coming year. Travel Alberta is committed to helping different regions within the province become important and an exciting destination. And through conversations of them, redirecting some of the tourism from the main attraction areas to Alberta to other areas that they find have equal value and disperse and be able to share in some of that tourism revenue within those areas. There are some pinch points through those conversations of a lot of people are going to those areas and it can't sustain those amount of people as well. So within the presentation today, they really concentrate on the Canadian Badlands Tourism Zone and look at the partnership that those individuals that are within that zone on how we can move forward together to promote this area as an opportunity. So as per their presentation today, I would like to recommend that council receive the Travel Alberta Destination Development Plan presentation as information.
Thank you for that, Mr. Gannon. Is there any comment? We know that our intent is to come back to have a more fulsome discussion on December the 5th, but even more so in January at the Committee of the Whole meeting. So Councillor Cunningham, thank you.
I move that council receive the Travel Alberta Destination Development Plan presentation as information.
Okay, thank you for that. We have a motion to receive the Travel Alberta Destination Development Plan presentation as information. Any further discussion? I'm not seeing any, so all those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. I think it's appropriate also that we receive for information the Capstone presentation that they made earlier to council for information as well. I don't think there's anything that we need to clarify more than just to receive it. So would someone care to make that? Councillor Christie?
I'll make the motion to receive the Capstone Infrastructure presentation as information.
Thank you for that. So we have a motion to receive the Capstone Infrastructure presentation as information. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is carried unanimously as well. Thank you. Moving on in our agenda. Council and committee reports. 9.1 is just a summary of a number of meetings that I have had. So Division 7 report, and I think I distributed to the majority of you that information. So I did participate in a meeting with Martin Shields, MP for part of our area, and it was a video conference meeting with many of the mayors and reeves of the communities within his riding. It is interesting that a lot of the issues raised are the same issues that we have. So cellular and broadband coverage is very poor in rural Alberta, continues to be poor, and seems to be getting no one's attention, but there you have it. Housing concerns were raised by most communities, with the lack of housing for Canadians being seen as a major issue for many, especially with the influx of immigrants and foreign workers. Affordable housing issues were raised, and seniors housing was also raised, with many pointing out how difficult it is to access federal funds for any type of rural housing project. And Mr. Shields was very, very aware of that. There was some discussion around new home warranties and the impediment that it provides for some builders because of the extra cost that's there. There is a private member's bill that's trying to make it easier to move livestock in Canada with all the electronic log issues that livestock transporters are having. And it's of particular interest to, you would be surprised, beekeepers. Once you get a truck full of bees and get moving down the road, you really can't stop. Otherwise, the bees leave the truck. So it is a big issue. But it relates to all the other types of livestock as well. So you could unload without really intending to if you happen to stop along the way. Anyway, and lots of concerns were expressed about the difficulties that municipalities are having trying to access federal programs, such as the Housing Accelerator Fund and the Green Municipality Fund. So, and those issues were echoed and echoed and echoed and echoed, so. Trochu Housing Corporation, November 14th meeting. They're still waiting for official announcements on their funding. I believe today they were meeting with AHS to discuss how or what the requirements for that funding would be. FCSS, we've passed our budget and we're moving forward. As I told you earlier, Golden Hills has come on board and contributed more funding to our family wellness worker program. And then I attended the FCSS conference in Edmonton. And again, there's many, many issues that are being repeated again and again and again by the different FCSS boards. We're all encountering the same problems. And I'll be honest, Alberta supports and Alberta works don't work. And that's a big problem for FCSS programs. We just are encountering major difficulties trying to support people in need who aren't getting the help that they need from the provincial programs. And programs like AISH and others that are to support vulnerable Albertans, they're just not getting through the door quick enough, and they're not getting the help they need quick enough. And so they're walking through our door, and of course, most FCSS people are the type of people that they care, and not to say that the provincial workers do not, but they certainly care. And when the person is in your doorway, it's very hard to turn them away. So we are providing a lot of support to provincial programs that we're not being compensated for.
I'm curious, just based on my own history, how do those two organizations get along with FCSS in helping them when they have those people in the door? I think that needs to be known as well.
Well, sometimes that can be a pleasant event, and sometimes you can be in a 2-hour conversation, and then all of a sudden the phone goes dead, so. And then you start over, so. And the last thing I would note is I did take part in the Kneehill County Christmas celebration on Friday evening. I thoroughly enjoyed the evening, and I thank our staff and the SLT team for making that evening a success. And my thanks to those who were involved in the planning implementation of the staff Christmas celebration. I thoroughly enjoyed myself. I abandoned my wife and spent a lot of time talking to different staff members and just seeing how things are going. And I would say that it was an event well received by all. So thank you to those responsible. All right, we're on to 9.2, which is Drumheller Solid Waste, and Councillor Christie.
I represented Deb at their annual meeting and the site tour. The site tour was extremely informative. One of the things I thought that their balers reminded me of the stationary balers of the 30s in agriculture. All the bales are hand-tied once they get done. The cardboard facility was operating while we were there with 2 employees. We asked about the air quality because it was quite dusty. They said their 4 ventilation fans were on. They need work there. They were offered masks, but staff doesn't wear them because they're hot and uncomfortable. Their cardboard facility is being very successful in making sure that the cardboard's sorted, which is extremely labor intensive. Most of us standing back said, why don't we have a machine that's moving some of that pile to the baler rather than walking back and forth? And they're just saying that's how they've been able to control the end product. I learned a little bit at the annual meeting about the EPR process, which is the Extended Producer Responsibility Program that's coming down from the government, where after 2 years, a producer of any product is going to be responsible for the cost of recycling. So they've set up their own committee to see where they go from that. So it reminded me a little bit about the ag plastics containers that now have to go back to the sales points. So there is a committee that just started in the Drumheller Solid Waste. And Deb is still the vice chair, so I didn't wreck that. Her letter didn't say that she wanted to be on the CPR committee, and they looked at me and I said, I'm not going there. So I left that up to her when she got back if she wanted to be involved in that EPR committee, but it's something that's coming down the pike that we got to be aware of. On there was so that's all I had on the Drumheller Solid Waste. On the town hall meeting hosted by John Conrad as the Associate Ag Minister, they're getting quite a bit of pushback on the drought map and the assistance in that drought map, both federally and provincially. To be able to be involved in that program, they had to sign off on the map. So if you're outside that drought map, you don't get funding. So that was kind of where, when we declared Kneehill County as a disaster area, we're kind of in the center of that map, but there's areas in the north that need assistance and they don't qualify for that program. The other point that they got to was the reservoir level across the province is getting quite a bit of feedback provincially. They're saying we're in the middle of a drought. The reservoirs did their job to supply water where we needed it. It's going to take a while for that to be rejuvenated with nature. They're really concerned about next year because those reservoirs are low. They talked a little bit about getting into the Weed Act right now to maybe give it a little more teeth for transportation right-of-ways and oil field where we can build back for anything on oil field sites that aren't being looked after. One of the comments in the chat room is they're not paying us now, how are they going to pay us later for any other, not necessarily Alberta transportation, but the oil field industry isn't paying their taxes, how are we going to bill for weed control? There was something else. Well, the Ag Extension Program is they're working with both industry and universities to try and come up with a broader Ag Extension Program that they're relying on education and industry to somewhat take the lead on that. And we all know where that's going. There's little or no ag extension in agriculture at this point. They talked a little bit about the water next spring, and they say they got hard decisions to make and be advised. So that was where that hour disappeared pretty quick, so. So that's what I have.
All right, thank you for that. Are there any questions or comments on the information as provided by Councillor Christie or myself? Councillor Cunningham.
Just interesting, yeah, I remember at Seniors Outreach, we did get lots of walk-in people too, and I think what's happening, there's a lot of people moving here from larger centers, and they're shocked to learn there's not a 24-hour food bank here, 24-hour bus service, so a little shocking. But my question was, so did you folks have any access to provincial staff or any ministers while you were up there at the conference? And I guess if you did, it doesn't sound like you got a lot of feedback.
Having access and getting results are two very, very different things. We usually have a breakfast session with the different MLAs where they're invited, and sometimes MLAs come and sometimes they don't. We did have a significant number of individuals in the room, and in addition, Premier Smith herself came and just presented to the delegates that were there for about 7 minutes, and then she was off to the rest of her day. So I have to acknowledge the fact that she knows that FCSS exists, and she is definitely interested in the work we're doing. And I think the overall tone of government in general, including the Minister Nixon, is that they are very aware of the work that we do and somewhat aware of the gaps. And of course, FCSS AA, the board, is definitely keeping those issues in front of the provincial eye. So, if there's no other questions, Councillor Phillips.
This is for Councillor Christie. Did anyone discuss about oil companies using water for fracking?
That was part of the tough decisions for next spring. Talking out of the reservoirs. At the same time, they're moving a lot of water out of Bigelow Dam right now. They're telling me that they're trying to get it down to do work on the dam. So I'm not sure what, I've heard that twice now from contractors that are there. Haven't heard that anywhere from environment. So.
Okay, any other questions? If not, I'd be looking for a motion to receive for information the council and committee reports as presented. Councillor Phillips.
So moved.
Okay, thank you for that. All those in favor? Okay, thank you. The council follow-up action list was pre-circulated. Are there any questions on that follow-up action list? Surely to goodness, we're not going to let them skate by on this one. Aren't we going to say, I know it's not on the list, but... Councillor Cunningham.
I can't let you go without, actually, it's not a question, it's thank you, because I did see we have a very beautiful, robust capital equipment plan forecast now as part of our budget, so I thank you for that. Well, I'm sure you had a hand in it.
That was a soft pitch. You're supposed to hit it out of the park.
Worked all night.
Definitely the work of the finance department in conjunction with us, yeah.
I was just going to say, we'll make sure that that Shane and Marika and a few others get the
Yes.
kudos for that.
For sure.
Yeah. If there are no other questions, I would look for a motion to receive the follow-up action list as presented. Councillor Cunningham.
I'll move that council receive for information the council follow-up action list as presented.
Okay, thank you for that. So if there's no further discussion, I'm going to ask the question. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. The only things left in our agenda are two closed session items. One is section 24, advice from officials, and the other is section 19, confidential evaluations. And we're postponing the one. So, Mr. Hogan?
Just on that note, Mr. Chair, I was going to say, so the Obviously, we'll need a motion to go into closed session, but the other motion we'd look for is just to defer 11.2 to the December 5th Committee of the Whole meeting.
Okay, all right, and we could do that right now. Counselor McGee.
So moved.
Okay, so we have a motion to defer 11.2 to the December 5th Committee of the Whole meeting. All those in favor? And that's carried unanimously as well. And then we would need a motion to go into closed session. Does anybody need a break, or are we good? Okay. So. Time frame is based on need. So I'm going to say let's take a 7-minute break. It's going to be a 6-minute shortly, or 7-minute, yes. And come back at 4:05. So we're in recess to 4:05. So you have 7 minutes to refresh your coffee. Okay, so it's 4:03 and we're back from recess. So the next order of business is actually a closed session item, which is under section 24, advice from officials, under FOIP. So I would need a motion to go into closed session. Councillor Christie?
So moved.
Okay, so we have a motion to go into closed session at 4:04. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. So we are in closed session and we'll wait